In Washington, the mood music says peace. The US Special Envoy for Ukraine is telling cameras a deal is really close, with two final knots to untie: the fate of the Donbass and the Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant. Moscow says not so fast. It wants radical changes to the American draft, while Kyiv pushes back on any settlement that trades land for promises. On paper, diplomats are counting meters to the finish line. In reality, the sprint could still turn into a marathon. Across the Atlantic, NATO foreign ministers just wrapped another round in Brussels, reaffirming long-term support to Ukraine and pushing allies to back that up with hard cash and hardware. And while Berlin quietly moved Eurofighters to Poland, Warsaw has been scrambling jets on nights when Russian barrages push close to NATO's border. The headline reads deterrence, but the subtext is unmistakable. The alliance is watching the skies. Yet even as negotiators polish phrases and ministers sign communiques, the battlefield has a way of interrupting the conversation. In the last 48 hours, Russia unloaded one of its largest mixed drone and missile attacks of the year against Ukraine's power grid, rail nodes and ports. Air raid sirens bled into dawn. Poland raised its air policing posture just in case. The diplomacy is whispering de-escalation. The artillery is shouting something else. Cut to the front line, where the story just changed tone. For much of the war, Russian air defenses have swatted Soviet-era jets and cheap drones. Now they're staring down a fully loaded F-16 flying straight out of a NATO playbook. Ukraine has begun flying the Viper in a true multi-role strike configuration. 8 GBU-39 Small Diameter Bombs under the wings, AIM-9 Sidewinders on the tips, AIM-120C AMRAAMs tucked in, and an ALQ-131 on the belly to mess with enemy radars. That's not a training lark, that's a strike package. We first got a clean look at this configuration back in mid-February, when a Ukrainian F-16 turned low over the steppe for a strike pass, the racks cradling 8 SDB glide bombs, tiny bodies with long reach. The aviationist confirmed what the silhouette already implied. Kyiv's Vipers had moved beyond patrol to precision attack. Western jets, Western weapons, Western tactics. Game on. Let's be clear about why that loadout matters. The GBU-39 is a 250-pound class bomb with a GPS brain and deployable wings. Lofted at speed and altitude, it can glide out to roughly 80 kilometers, far enough to hit a target, while the F-16 stays beyond the envelope of most short to medium range SAMs. They don't roar in like missiles. They coast. Quiet, small radar cross-section, deadly accurate. Good luck intercepting something you don't hear coming. And because the Viper can carry 8 of them at once, a single aircraft can fan a salvo at multiple aim points, ammunition bunkers, radar sites, EW vans, or the kind of last-ditch gun trucks Russia parks around key nodes. It's the kind of economy of force NATO has practiced for decades. One jet, many precise problems for the enemy to solve. It's like ordering a sampler platter of headaches, and Russian air defense has to swallow all of them. While the F-16s were showing their teeth, Ukraine executed a textbook behind-the-lines takedown in Crimea. In a joint Navy special operations strike on the Saki airbase area, Ukraine hit a Russian command node, blew up storage for Orion strike drones, and took out multiple air defense systems, specifically Tor-M2 and Pantsir-S1 units, plus a Zu-23-2 anti-aircraft gun mounted on a Kamaz truck. In other words, the eyes, the hands, and the close-in claws covering one of Russia's prized air hubs. That wasn't a one-off. Within days, open-source analysts aggregated more footage of Ukrainian unmanned systems, teams erasing Russian SAMs across the theatre. Buks and Taurus torched in coordinated hits that Ukrainian officials pegged at roughly $60 million in damage. Where air defense is thin, glide bombs begin. That cause and effect rhythm is exactly how Western air campaigns dismantle a hard target set, cut the radars, blind the interceptors, and then start picking off what those air defenses were protecting. What makes SDBs so unsettling to defend against isn't just range, it's predictability, or rather, the lack of it. Russian air defenders have grown used to the signature of Shahed-type drones and the flight profiles of old glide kits. But an F-16 that tosses 8 SDBs at a cluster of targets forces a TOR or Pantsir crew to solve several geometry problems at once, each bomb on a slightly different glide path, some masked by terrain, all small, cold and quiet. The intercept window shrinks, the kill chain clogs, the operator's probability of kill drops. That's not bravado, that's physics. Meanwhile, Russia's own glide bomb binge, Fab 1500 and friends, has pounded Ukrainian trenches for months. By Kyiv's count, October saw over 5,000 Russian glide bombs, and 2025 has already topped 44,000. It's brutal, but it has also trained Ukrainian planners to think in terms of glide weapon duels, counter-battery for the air. The difference now is that Ukraine can return the favour with precision at scale. Zoom out, and the operational picture becomes even harsher for Moscow. In mid-November, Ukrainian long-range drones struck the Saratov oil refinery hard enough that primary processing halted. One refinery offline is economics. Multiple strikes are strategy, starving a war machine of lubricants, aviation fuel, and the logistics that keep a mechanized army moving. The Saratov hit was part of a longer campaign that also found Russian seaports and terminals. On the Black Sea, Ukraine's maritime drones keep making headlines. Most recently at the Caspian Pipeline Consortium terminal off Novorossiysk, where damage to a single-point mooring forced a partial export halt before workarounds limped the flow back. Even a temporary slowdown at a terminal handling over 1% of global oil underscores a reality the Kremlin hates to admit. The Black Sea is no longer a Russian lake. And every time the fleet and its infrastructure hunker down, Ukraine's risk calculus for airborne standoff strikes improves. Fresh this week, Kyiv's general staff confirmed drones hit Temryuk seaport and the Syzran oil refinery, a reminder that Russia's depth isn't a sanctuary anymore. With F-16s in the mix, the menu of targets within reach expands from what's vulnerable to a drone to what's viable for a precision glide. Command posts, radar farms, EW clusters, and any high-value depot that thought distance was a defence. The Tor-M2 and Pantsir-S1 are the backbone of Russia's point defence network. They're meant to be the umbrella over everything from ammo dumps to runway edges. When those systems start disappearing, as they did around Saki, the effect cascades. Drone hangars become bonfires. Command centres start relocating. The remaining launchers spend more time hiding than hunting. And once local air defences are degraded, F-16s can press closer or launch from safer geometry, multiplying the accuracy of standoff weapons. Ukrainian officials say the destruction of Pantsirs has been a priority. Almost half the inventory claimed wrecked or crippled by late October. And while Russia can push replacements to the front, the crews are learning that shoot and scoot is a drone skill too. The endgame here isn't a cartoonish air superiority overnight, it's erosion. You don't need to delete every SAM in a grid. You just need to knock out enough nodes at the right time to open corridors for precision strikes. That's what the F-16 brings: timing, reach, and repeatability. Overnight into December 6th, Russia hurled a huge wave, more than 650 drones plus 51 missiles across 8 Ukrainian regions, hammering energy, rail, and port infrastructure. Ukraine and the IAEA reported reduced output at nuclear plants as the grid absorbed shocks. In Kyiv Oblast, at least 3 people were injured. Poland scrambled jets, trains were cancelled around Fastiv after a depot took a hit. It was a maximalist message from Moscow, right as peace talk headlines floated across tickers. Ukraine answered where it hurts: logistics and depth. Within the same 48-hour window, Kyiv confirmed drone attacks on the Syzran refinery and the Temryuk seaport, extending a pattern of blows from Saratov to the Black Sea littoral. While in Crimea, Ukrainian military intelligence released footage of a Russian MiG-29 destroyed on the ground. That last one isn't just a plane on fire, it's psychological pressure on aircrews who thought the peninsula was a backline safehouse. At the front, the ISW CTP assessments and Ukrainian General Staff tallies painted a grimly familiar picture on December 6th. 150 plus engagements in a day, Russian pressure east of Pokrovsk and toward Myrnograd, and yet no decisive breakthrough. It's trench lines, attritional surges, and the slow redraw of fire sacks. Map overlays from ISW show marginal Russian gains around Myrnograd. Ukrainian sources described multiple attacks repelled near Kostiantynivka and elsewhere. In plain English, the line flexed, but it didn't snap. As for armoured losses, the day-to-day tally is a fog machine. One thing we can verify from Ukrainian reporting on December 6th, several BMP-3 infantry fighting vehicles, some with Cactus ERA, were destroyed by Ukrainian units operating in the Kursk sector and the south. It's not the dramatic turret-tossing tank kill that grabs social media, but it matters. BMP-3s are the backbone of Russian mechanized assaults, and every burned chassis is one less armoured taxi to the line. Russia fired big and hit hard. NATO jets went on alert. Ukraine struck back deep and kept the front from buckling. The chessboard moved a few squares. The clock keeps ticking. The imagery of that F-16 with 8 SDBS isn't just a cool poster for military geeks. It's doctrine crossing a border. Western strike packages operate on choreography. Decoys and jammers to stretch the radar picture, glide munitions to peel apart the defences, then follow-on waves to crater the thing you actually came for. Ukraine's been approximating that with adapted MiGs and Sukhois. The Viper makes it native. The ALQ-131 in the photos tells you the mission isn't hope and pray, it's suppress and strike. There's a reason Russia keeps dispersing its radars around Crimea and the land bridge. Every destroyed Tor-M2 or Pantsir-S1 isn't just a piece of metal, it's a gap in coverage. Multiply those gaps and suddenly the path for a silent, GPS-guided glide looks a lot like an invitation. As more F-16s cycle into readiness, the math changes. Fewer sorties to generate the same effects, more flexibility to pick time on target, and better survival odds against a layered SAM threat that's being harassed every hour by drones. If you're wondering how a land war in eastern Ukraine intersects with moorings in the Black Sea and a refinery on the Volga, here's the through line: pressure. The CPC terminal hit near Novorossiysk cut Russia's export artery to a trickle before partial recovery. Turkey publicly warned both sides to keep energy infrastructure out of the crosshairs, which is diplomatic code for "we're seeing you and insurers are too." In that climate, every Ukrainian success against the Black Sea Fleet or its shore support tightens the screws on Moscow's options. Why does that matter to an F-16? Because when Russia's maritime and energy infrastructure is under duress, it pulls air defense assets away from the front and toward ports, refineries, and bridges. Spread a defensive network thinner and thinner, and the probability that an SDB sneaks through goes up. This is what a 21st century air campaign looks like when you can't quite do shock and awe. You do nibble and numb until the nerve fibers stop firing. NATO isn't flying combat over Ukraine, but its fingerprints are all over the air picture. When Poland's jets scramble, when Germany stations Eurofighters in Malbork, when the alliance recommits to long-haul support, that sustains the ecosystem Ukraine needs to keep its own jets in the fight. Fuel, spare parts, training pipelines, EW data, and, yes, munitions resupply. The alliance is the scaffolding. The F-16 is the builder. And the politics? NATO's Secretary General has been blunt. There's no unanimous green light for fast-track Ukrainian membership yet, but the commitment to arm, train and sustain is now policy, not charity. That's the difference between headlines and hardware. You don't need a membership card to use the playbook. Here's Moscow's dilemma. To stop F-16 SDBs, you need tight, layered coverage near every plausible target. Tor for the near fight, Pantsir for medium, Buk for the mid to high, and S-300/400 for standoff. But those assets are already whack-a-moling drones, and Ukraine keeps hunting the hunters. You can rotate fresh batteries in, but every movement exposes them to ISR and FPV stalkers. It's the paradox of protection. The more you show to defend, the more the enemy sees to hit. Add one more pain point. Russia has normalized industrial-scale glide bombing against the front. That's cost-effective for them, but it conditions Ukrainian air planners to the tactics tempo. Now, with F-16s pushing their own glides, Russian brigades that thought they owned the glide domain have to budget intercepts for both sides. An air defense banker's nightmare. So what does this mean for tomorrow's map? Expect more Crimea. The series of precise strikes, radars, aircraft, SAMs, and that Zu-23 truck serving as a close-in swatter, signals a deliberate campaign to pick apart the peninsula's air defence grid. As gaps widen, watch for higher value hits, hardened C2 nodes, long-range radar heads, and aviation fuel farms. Each loss pushes Russian aviation further from the front, buying Ukrainian brigades breathing space. Deep inside Russia, oil remains a target. Saratov's downtime showed that even a few explosions can ripple into weeks of repairs. The calculus for Kyiv is simple. Every barrel not refined, every tanker not loaded, is another day Russia pays more to fight the same war. And when a Black Sea terminal goes dark, even briefly, the world notices. Insurance notices. Traders notice. That's leverage you can't get from a single trench win. On the line around Pokrovsk and Mirnohrad, look for more of the ugly. Small advances, brutal counterattacks, and casualty-heavy seesaws where a blown BMP-3 or a smouldering T-80 BVM isn't just hardware lost, but infantry stranded. That's why striking lift and protection, the armour that moves squads to contact, is strategically smart. Bleed the assault formations and you slow the offensive, even if the front line on a map barely shifts. Crimea will keep burning, the Black Sea will keep wobbling, and the front will keep grinding, with F-16s now able to turn local air defence gaps into precise, repeatable damage. We know Ukraine's F-16s are not just flying air defence, they're configured for real strike missions, with 8 STBs, AIM-120CS, AIM-9s, and ECM pods. We know Ukraine is executing deep strikes, from Crimea to Saratov. We've seen the aftermath at Saki, command posts down, drone hangars hit, Tor-M2 and Pantsir-S1 destroyed, and that Zu-23 Kamaz silenced. We know Russia can still throw colossal salvos, that NATO remains on alert, and that the front is elastic but unbroken. What we don't know, and shouldn't pretend to, is the exact kill list of every single F-16 sortie. Ukraine guards that data tightly, and some strikes in Crimea were clearly executed by drones and special operations, not by jets. Where claims are unverified, we say so. Where imagery and reputable reporting align, we follow the evidence. That's how we keep one foot in reality while telling a story that moves. This is the first time Ukraine has shown off the real thing. Western jets, Western weapons, flown with Western tactics, and backed by the kind of strategic pressure that turns pipelines, ports, and airbases into liabilities. Russia spent years fighting museum pieces and motorcycles with wings. Now it's facing an airframe built for this exact problem set, hurling glide bombs that whisper rather than scream. Diplomats can keep making meters toward the tape. We'll all be thrilled if they break it. But on the ground and in the sky, the contest is still decided by who can break the other's shield faster. Ukraine just added a sword that fits the grip. And for Russia's air defences, the major problem isn't just that an F-16 can throw 8 accurate glides at once. It's that the 9th problem, a follow-on wave, a drone swarm, or a strike from a direction nobody expected, is already on the way. Politics says almost there. The battlefield says not yet. In between, an F-16 arcs high, 8 STBs quietly unfold their wings, and somewhere deep behind the lines, a controller realizes the screens are going dark. Ukraine's F-16s are officially in the fight, and Russia's air defences may have a very major problem indeed. Peace talk soundbites are heating up. The Kremlin wants territorial sweeteners that Kyiv rejects. NATO reiterated support in Brussels, while Germany forward-based jets in Poland. Poland's alert posture followed Russia's mass strike on December 6th. Ukraine in turn hit Temryuk and Syzran and showed a burned MiG-29 in Crimea. The map around Mirnohrad twitched but didn't fold, and somewhere a ground crew chief in a frozen dispersal bay is tightening a last fastener on a quadruple rack, because tomorrow's weather window looks good for gliding. In a war where soundbites travel faster than shells, the only argument that matters is made in steel and fire. Ukraine's F-16s just delivered their opening statement. The courtroom is the sky, the jury is Russia's air defense grid, and the verdict is starting to glide in.